In the early 1900s, John D. Rockefeller was the richest man in America, and his company, Standard Oil, controlled the entire market. But the government was about to break it up for being a monopoly, and Rockefeller was facing huge taxes and public pressure. So he starts to move his money into tax-free foundations. These charitable trusts are a legal structure that still exists today, and it gives the ultra-wealthy a way to avoid tax while keeping full control of their wealth and using philanthropy as a moral shielding from their power. The trick is, once the money is in the trust, it is no longer considered part of your estate. So when you die, there's no inheritance tax on that. And any investments made by the trust are also tax-free. So of course, the foundation's money is invested, often in companies that are tied to the owner's interests. And those investments keep the money in that trust growing over generations tax-free. And because the founder picks the trustees, the foundation will keep spending money in ways that align to that founder's long-term goals. Legally, this is classed as charitable, but these trusts and foundations have been consistently weaponized to reshape policy, fund industry, and influence public life. Rockefeller used his foundation to pour money into education with massive strings attached. Billionaires still do this exact same thing today. They just have different names on the foundations. But the legal structure has not changed, and the tax benefits are enormous. So in 1902, Rockefeller sets up the General Education Board. On the surface, this is a charity to help schools, but the schools could only get the money if they changed how they were run. And they all had to adopt a specific Rockefeller corporate style of management. They all had to follow the same central plan, a plan that was not written by teachers but by industrialists. And the plan focused on practical training for industrial jobs and no independent learning. Rockefeller's own education advisor said that the goal of this curriculum was to produce obedient workers, not thinkers. The same year, he donates $1 million to Harvard Medical School, but it came with a condition that Harvard had to raise additional matching funds from other wealthy donors. This forces Harvard to deepen its ties with the elite and align the school's education priorities with the donor class, who want good little industrial workers who don't think critically, especially not about capitalism. The second string attached to this money is that Harvard has to restructure its medical program to match Rockefeller's preferred governance and curriculum. So the governance change is that it starts to consolidate authority within these institutions to smaller and more centralized boards. This reduces the ability of the faculty to have direct influence on the direction of the long-term strategy. It also limits the scope of who and how people are appointed to these powerful positions. They also overhaul the entire curriculum at Harvard Medical School. And this is one example of several medical schools that Rockefeller went after. They modeled this new system on the German system, which had been designed to serve the emerging corporate hospital pharmaceutical nexus. First, it centralizes medical education into these urban elite-funded hospitals, and it ties any smaller medical facilities to these larger, well-funded hospital systems. This pushes doctors into expensive centralized systems that rely on costly equipment and new drugs. It increases the amount of contracting for industrialists creating expensive medical equipment, pharmaceuticals, and specialist services. This is the dawn of neoliberalism in its most aggressive form. It's the steel factories that are manufacturing surgical equipment, petro companies that start manufacturing early synthetic drugs. The second thing that Rockefeller did at Harvard is that laboratory research priorities shift from medicine to the research industrial pipeline, which I have done a few videos about this research industrial pipeline before. It is a closed loop of policy influence that prioritizes the profits of robber barons over actual medical science research. In this system, medical schools created the demand and trained the workers for private industry and industry-controlled research. The third thing that he did was raised admission standards. You now required an expensive proprietary education to get into Harvard Medical School. This obviously limits entry to wealthy people, which keeps the whole medical profession economically and socially tied to the elites. It also substantially reduces the likelihood of you ever finding a Harvard-trained doctor in a working class or rural community, because quite simply, return on investment is lower. And the fourth thing, arguably one of the most damaging things that he did, he shifted the model away from community-based medical training, removing any low-cost general practitioners or folk medicine that's harder to monetize. What emerges instead is a high-cost, high professional barrier, formal institutional service, which meant all patients across America now had to engage with and pay for corporate aligned healthcare. Doctors trained in this system are more likely to work in a hospital system, prescribe expensive patented drugs, and rely on medically manufactured treatment rather than entertaining any kind of inexpensive local home remedy. The United States since has had a healthcare system that is structurally dependent on industrial production, an incredibly lucrative industry for a robber baron, and now Americans have some of the worst health outcomes in the world. It spends far more on healthcare than any other nation. It is ranked last among wealthy countries on measures of accessibility to care, administrative efficiency, and the overall outcomes. This video is 7 minutes long, and I've only spoken about Harvard Medical School. There is so much more to this. I have a huge amount of research on this. I'm actually struggling to condense it down into story format because there's just so much that's bad. If you want to go through all of the Rockefeller stuff, all of the robber baron stuff, as I process it, make videos out of it and publish, I've left all of the research in a Notion. And if you are American and you feel like using it and telling these stories, please do. It's free Creative Commons, go for it. It's in the Discord link is below. The last thing I'm going to read out, just on the medical schools, I'll come back later and do a video about standard testing and loads of other crap that he did, but just on the medical schools. The impact was devastating for black medical education. Of 7 black medical schools in 1900, only 2 survived by 1920. This wasn't incidental, but a reflection on Rockefeller and his aides' explicit belief that black physicians should focus on hygiene rather than surgery, preventing them from contaminating their white neighbors. Quote, "The closure of 5 black medical schools eliminated an estimated 27,000 to 35,000 potential black physicians between when they closed and 2019. So it's not a surprise to anyone that Rockefeller was hella racist, but America needs to understand where these systems came from so that they can be rectified. The American education system is deeply, systemically poisoned by this man.